one of the blessings was that it's a small community, first of all. And through relationships, because everything's built on relationships. This building is built on relationships. And I happen to be the survivor of the co-founders. So hence, since I am the survivor, they kind of lean on me. But nevertheless, there was a lot of mixed matching, and maybe that's where being a lawyer and being involved in the community, you kind of know where some people's interests are and stuff like that. So I'm not an unknown commodity, nor were they. So once we were up and going and people were starting to look at us, the question is, should we invest in this? Or is this going to be another nascent, well-intended, not-for-profit that will last 5 years and not last? So there's a look and watch. And I never talked about this, but by having people with gravitas involved, Betty, Carl, Dan Bratton, Mr. Chautauqua, that drew in. You had the beloved president of Chautauqua. All those people I mentioned early on were Chautauquans, so that gave me entree. Betty Linnae, she is a contributor here at the Reg, Linnae, but also Chautauqua. She's all over Chautauqua. Enter the Tom Hagans, enter the Joe Rates, enter a lot Marty Coyle's Chautauquans. And I was at Chautauqua. My wife was on the board, Cindy. So that are another spheres of influence. So if you look at spheres of influence, some of that happened. And then there's this academic part. I'm a history nerd. I like that. So that's where my personal interest is, history. So hence doing interviews. I love that. Bringing people in here who were one step removed. I mean, they were Jackson, but they were with Jackson. That's me. Linda Brown, Karl Matsu, all these people. I really made an effort to track them down, to make it, they wanted to come. And they always would come for nothing. I mean, nothing. Why? Jackson. It's just Jackson. I mean, yeah, you paid their flights and stuff like that, but there's no honorariums, which was, we were lucky because we didn't have a lot of money to do honorariums. And so as you kind of look at Lillian Nays and all of these other people I've mentioned, pieces of the puzzle, and then John Barrett, then you had the family members, Harold Adams, John Barrett, Melissa Jackson, Tom Loftus, Bob Loftus, Julia Craighill, all of the grandkids were kind of enveloped and brought in. And then to the foundations. I did some legal work with those guys, but they clearly were supporters. And if I start listing them all, I will miss. But one of the guys that really was helpful and deserves a lot more attention than he gets is Randy Sweeney. Randy was the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation, and he quietly knew everything about everybody. And we set up foundations, we set up funds to benefit the Jackson Center. I think we have like 25 funds, more than any other not-for-profit. And that was all done in the early years. And that was Randy helping out, and that was all kind of terrific. And that was, all this happened the first year. I mean, and again, the idea was to, and I knew we had to do something spectacular. With Gerhard, with Chautauqua was Lillian just getting us into Chautauqua. That wasn't mine. Dollar Boys, and then of course C-SPAN. My God, get C-SPAN here, and to have the Nuremberg prosecutors. And we really worked those guys. We took them to Jamestown Community College, one at a time. Henry King went to JCC. Bernie Meltzer went to Jamestown High School with Rick Walders and Paul Benson and those guys. Whitney Harris, I don't know how many times he spoke, but all over the place. And then we had interviews with all of them. So we interviewed them, they spoke, and of course then C-SPAN. All in their mid-80s and 90s. I mean, we really worked them. I think they had fun. And so that was really our first year. And that concept continued on throughout, certainly the beginning years. My sense, personal sense is, Wiley wanted to get the Jackson Center to understand the biography of Jackson. You know, how do you understand it when you're not talking to him? Well, talk to the guys that knew him. And some of the people we had here in our boatload of interviews are people who were guys that took care of his boat, guys that took care of his, sold him shoes, guys that waited on him in restaurants. You know, if you had any contact with Jackson, we were interviewing him.
His bodyguard.
His bodyguard, yes. Moritz Fuchs, Father Moritz Fuchs. And in fact, that's a whole 30-minute conversation at some point. Because we would go track them down. Yeah, I don't think I should go down that rabbit hole of all the other people, but it's...
Not this time, but...
Yeah, maybe another time. So I guess, just so you know, I'm talking to Ed Tomasini and Maddy DeJoy. Maddy's here, been working on the archives, and sat in and listened to this, and will critique me when I get done. So, anyways, questions, Maddy. Your questions are saying, all right, Greg, answer this one. She's preparing on our 20th. This is being done part of the 25th anniversary of the Jackson Center. December 14th was our Founders Day. That just happened to be the day when the major benefactors first met, but none of them had really kicked in until 2001. None of this really happened. 2003. Now, one of the Ed is, while we're on the film here, I'm sure at the time, the dream was to get the Chief Justice here because he was a law clerk of Robert Jackson. No question. That's as big as it gets. Now, maybe during 2001, I'd have to check, but I bet I reached out to the office maybe during 2001 to see if they might be interested. And I'd have to check as to what the date was that we were first contact with the office. But ultimately, they came here in 2003. May 17th, 2003. Not that I don't remember the date, but that was a huge, huge date. That's a whole segment. A whole segment. Because we had 3/4 of Jamestown involved in that. It was just a lot. There's a book. There's a playbook like this. And we had NPR, C-SPAN. For several reasons, they were here because there was a slight chance, that because there's rumors going around that Chief Justice Rehnquist might announce his retirement. Just pure rumor. And thinking maybe when he's with the background of his boss, talking about his boss, Jackson, and all that stuff. Maybe. Hence, there was more than casual interest in showing up here. A lot of people, a lot of media. That didn't happen. Nor do we ever, no hints other than just idle speculation by people. So that, among the many things, Rehnquist, Roberts, Linda Brown, Barnett, Kormatzes, it goes on.
I guess something I was thinking about is there were a lot of Jamestown giants, and as you had mentioned, the spheres of influence and local legends that were working on this. What was a lot of the general perception of the center when it first started from an average Jamestown person? Was there a lot of engagement that was going on there? What were their ideas of a lot of the events that were happening?
I think it's safe to say that most everybody, and this would include not necessarily the middle class person or the normal resident, knew very little about Robert Jackson. And I often mentioned the fact that Robert Jackson, most people would just know he was a justice of the Supreme Court. He had something to do with Nuremberg. He practiced in Jamestown and is buried in Frewsburg. That's it. That is it. And then in really 1996, when Justice Sandra Day O'Connor came here to dedicate the statue, frankly, that for me personally and for others, kind of took it up a notch or two, saying this guy's extraordinary. He died in '54, so a lot of time had lapsed. And so it really had to kind of start with the Jamestown Bar Association, because he's clearly the biggest name at the bar. He's front and center at one of the composites upstairs. And then kind of work from that, and that's hence part of the reason to do the big programming. Gerhardt, Dullabois, Nuremberg, C-SPAN, to get folks that were outside the immediate sphere of influence, those that were contributors. Again, many foundations got involved, ultimately got involved. And then they would show up. Once they showed up, coupled with the fact of the Post-Journal. I wish Christy Herbst were here. The Post-Journal did a lot. They published a lot. Extra pamphlets, extra programming. I spent a lot of time with Christy Herbst. She knew before anything happened. I mean, I would muse with her. And I'm hoping sometime will come and I'll interview her about those days. She's agreed to do it, but just hasn't happened. But yeah, the early days, in fact, most, if not all, of our calendars, which we have, are Post-Journal articles, which anything we gave them, they got, and they covered it well. Not only before, during, and after. There's pictures of this. So we got a lot of publicity from the Post-Journal and Jim Roselli at WJTN. Jim loved this place, loved it. And so he would call all the time, what's going on? What's going on? Because he would want to set up a program here. He would kind of hope that we would set our program up around his morning show. It wasn't practical normally. But when Jim, he interviewed and he would talk it up as long as he lived. He talked it up. Dennis Webster subsequently did the same thing. So between the radio and the print media, they got it out to the community. So after a while, you say, Jackson, Robert Jackson, Jamestown native, the only man, the answer to the Jeopardy question, named the only man who was an Attorney General, Solicitor General, and a Justice of the Supreme Court. And oh, by the way, Chief Prosecutor at the Nuremberg trial. Wow, Jamestown, whoa. If you say it enough, all of a sudden people show up. Then we did young readers programs. And then we would do other related, to get the students involved. We went to Warren. We did a lot of stuff. We had a very active education committee, very active.
And teaching American history with Paul Benson was a big one.
Teaching American history, which I didn't know, I forgot the name of it, but yeah.
Brought in a lot of speakers.
Yep.
High-level speakers.
And they did. So again, Rick Walters and Paul Benson, which again, they got started this 2001. Paul, it was really Paul, he was very close to Dan. He kind of was shadowed him. And so when Dan became our executive director, Paul, I don't know if Dan said, could you mind if Paul comes? I'm not sure exactly what happened, but he came and continued to provide us support for a long time, right up through when he went to Fredonia. By the way, he's Dr. Paul Benson now. That's his name. Do you know him at Fredonia?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. I don't know if he's teaching. But there's just a lot of personalities. And we, on our 10th anniversary, we listed in a program, attempted to list all the volunteers that we had. And it was pages. Docents. And I can't also, this is for other years to happen, but when Raleigh became the executive director, Raleigh was a legislator, former assemblyman. Raleigh was very close with Bill Parment, very close with, who was our assemblyman, and Bill was in the majority. That's the Democrats were in the majority assembly, the Republicans were the majority in the Senate. So we got relationships with both of them. Pat McGee, Kathy Young, over here in the Senate, Bill Parment. And over time, roughly about $1.5 million came here in earmarks. See this all here? All this capital improvement? Bill Parment, who has agreed to be interviewed, by the way. So that's going to happen. So that's, to me, I'm glad I could talk about it at some point. I'm glad this is being postscripted, you know, the rest of the story. You can figure out what to do with Ed when I'm long gone.
Well, this is episode 1,
It's episode 1.
maybe episode 2.
It's actually 2. But it's a lot of random thoughts. You asked the question, but it is interesting. I mean, if you psychoanalyze it, the spheres of influence which happened with the foundations, because the foundations, they were looking at us. You know, yeah, you got Betty, you got Carl, you got me, you got Raleigh, you got Dan. We could at least get to maybe the top of the list of the applications for money. And we got money. We had to, you know, capital here, capital there. And again, I won't name them all because somebody may see this at some point and you'd say, how could you miss that foundation? And I will. But they all did, all of them. And not that we were keeping score, but we made sure, because we knew those people who were the heads of it. We knew the board members. We knew those people. It's all part of the spheres of influence, and you'd see them at a social setting. You know, how's our application done? I mean, we were bold that way. And Raleigh was very good at that. Raleigh was very good. And we had, other people who were part of this as well. And Maddy, next question. You got me. You got me right here.
I don't know if this is too political to ask, but like, what was the Fenton's reaction to a lot of this? Like having a second, not necessarily competing, but a second history museum that came in during this time. Like, did they feel any sort of way about those things? Was it
It's a really good
more
question.
collaborative back then than less?
Yeah, the answer is yes. They're collaborative. Kristen Stein, and I really may remember that as she's one of the early pictures of my 2001 pictures, was intimate with us. And Fenton, to their credit, had, prior to our existence, a big exhibit down at the Fenton History Center, 4 or 5 big panels of Jackson's life story. In fact, I took pictures of those and turned it into a video montage, and that's what we showed here. And they had through the bequest of William Jackson, I think, had given to the Fenton items. His morning coat, a couple of his authorizations, Harry Truman signing, chief prosecutor, the originals. How cool. So they had them. They still have them. They still have them. And so they were very cooperative. Whenever we had events, they would always share them because they knew we were focused in on one thing, not anything else. One thing, one person. You know, it's just like the Lucy Desi is one thing, one person. Roger Tory Peterson, one thing, one person. So it's unlike the Fenton, which is all of Chautauqua County, or all of Jamestown area. So no, that's a really good question. They did make available to this and has indicated that that they would share and give to us their items at Jackson when we're ready for it. I mean, and Harold Adams, who directed all of that stuff to them originally as the nephew of this, he was the guy, wrote a letter saying, please give it to the Jackson Center. They said, great. We're a certain organization, which is a New York State certified museum. And in order to de-access it, they'd have to give it to a New York State certified museum, and we're not. We never incorporated to be, never intended to be, because that's a whole different statutory world. What we have here, exhibitry to support our not-for-profit mission. That's different. And you'll be able to explain that to me, Maddy, someday when you become the foremost librarian that you will be. But that's what I know. It's a good question. You know, like, No, they never had that.
Well, also around that, has there ever been any feelings of, or like with Frewsburg residents, like seeing as Jamestown takes a lot of the credit towards Jackson's growth period in youth and early career when he was born in the Frewsburg area? Have there been?
He wasn't born in Frewsburg.
Well, oh wait, no, he was born in. Well, he grew up in Spring Creek. My apologies, but like graduated from Frewsburg and is buried in Frewsburg. Have there been any?
They have items there. I should mention that town of Carroll, a guy named Howitt, who's part of the Robert Howitt Jackson, the Howitts, have exhibitry down there, and there were certain things which became available at some point early on where they kept it down there, town of Carroll. So, and we've had events supporting them. They've had events coming up here, but they're very proud of that relationship. So there is exhibitry there as well. Some of that stuff we gave to them, or lent to them image-wise. So yeah, all good questions as to Warren. Like what I've always said, Warren, Pennsylvania should really grab him. He's born there, Spring Creek. So I've been down there encouraging him to spend money to do things at Spring Creek, and they get it. They get it, and we have annually given out the Robert H. Jackson Gale Gerald book to Warren High School folks. And they always have annual events in Warren. In fact, around February 13th is his birthday. So they have some, and we have one coming up this year. At the courthouse, yeah. And it's a big deal. So in fact, I remember early on going down and speaking at the Warren Historical Society, and almost annually I would do it starting in 2004 and 5, just to get them juiced up, saying, "You're the guys who can lay as much claim as we can. We just happen to have a building." He spent his adult career here, so they sponsor a lot of events down there, and they come up here quite a bit.
So it seems like the center truly was such a local initiative and local inspiration to uplift Jackson. Do you know if during his tenure on the Supreme Court and many of the other things, did he maintain a lot of those local connections?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he was buried in buried in Frewsburg, and his funeral was at St. Luke's, my home church. But like, did he do anything while he was in those higher positions for the communities here that you know?
Yeah, well, just a very bunch of them. One, he would always annually come back to visit his sisters. Both lived here, and so he would come back in the summer. He would accept speaking engagements almost annually here, Jamestown High School, Milton Fletcher, Mary Willard, when there were eulogies or honorees, the dedication of the Jamestown High School, when this one was dedicated, he was a speaker. So he was the celebrity guy who would come back. He would go to Spring Creek annually to rent the old house that he used to own. They'd rent it, and then his kids would come up and they would camp there. So he kept touch, and certainly kept touch with quite a few of the lawyers that he practiced with. We have lots of correspondence with those guys, the Ernie Leitz, the Ernest Callcrofts, just a lot of people like that. So yeah, he did not forget Jamestown. He did not forget Frewsburg, because his one sister lived in Frewsburg. In fact, lived in the house. Lived in the house there's a plaque there now. It's the Harold Adams house in Frewsburg.
But after his funeral, which was here, which was pretty unique, I don't think that there's been a funeral like that for Supreme Court.
No, the St. Luke's. Funeral in October of 1954. In fact, that's what got me started. If you hear the first segment of this called "In the Beginning," I say, where did I come from and all this? It was really interviewing attorneys in 2000, early 2000, before there was a center, about that one day in time when the Jamestown Bar Association hosted the funeral at St. Luke's, and all 8 justices showed up. That was. Yeah, I mean, and you guys have the original pictures there. When I say you guys, it's St. Luke's. has them, and it was. I wanted to capture that, the attorneys who had lunch at Moonbrook with the Supreme Court justices, because you remember that. I mean, that just seared in your brain. You know what they had to meal, you know what they had to drink, you know what they said, and to grab those people who were still among us. And that was my project. I loved that one day in time where you could isolate it and try to find pictures we found movies, we found pictures, we found stuff that probably would have been lost in a dustbin.
Did you find an original program for this funeral anywhere? I know there's the one upstairs from the 50th rededication of it.
Yeah, I don't know that we did. Yep, there may be a scrapbook moment. Got to be, if there is one, it would be in your St. Luke's scrapbooks. Well, but they, it took a while. It's an interesting story because I will not bore you with how I tracked down a million places that did not keep the pictures of the funeral, and only to find that St. Luke's had 8 to 12 of original shots taken by, I just drawn a senior moment here, a very famous photographer, the originals. The rest of the newspapers had them, but all their pictures that they took were thrown out. Warren, Jamestown, Frewsburg, all the historical societies only had newspaper articles. So you'd say, oh man, it's too big a deal not to have the original photos. But it'll come to me with the photographer side. But anyways, the mother lode was, for me, was at St. Luke's. I remember calling up there and kind of identifying who I was, what I want. And somebody said, I don't think we have them. And they looked at a file, and sure enough, I said, I'll be right up. I'll be right up. Immediately went to a photography place and they make lots of copies. The saddest part of all, because she took photography of everybody who was everybody. They did the family. It was like 50 years of photography. And I got a hold of the executor of the estate saying, where are the photographers? I mean, if these are the 8 good ones, there's got to be 50 bad ones. That would be great for us. And she goes, oh, I'm so sorry, but we reached out to all the people who were seen in the pictures to buy them in the estate, and then once they didn't, we just took them to the landfill. Exactly. That's the biggest. If you're a librarian, Maddy, you'd say, oh no, give it to the fence, do something, but don't do that. They did it. So that was one of those. That's what happens. So thank God for St. Luke's. There's some other, you I think have probably more stuff there. Dennis O'Prey was an acolyte. I've interviewed Dennis about being an acolyte. And of course his dad was one of the presiding ministers. Governor Dewey was there. It was definitely probably the biggest event in St. Luke's history.
Saved all of this too. I mean, especially nowadays when so many people are getting rid of the character in old houses.
Well, I must, again, not during the first time period of 2001, but much of the chandeliers, this table, which used to have glass on it, gone. This was Betty Lene.
Wasn't the chandelier down in the basement?
No. That's the story of the other room. It's Betty Lene who came and she said, this looks like old, dated, probably had other terms, but she's the one that had the money and the foresight to, we got a brand new table. This is done by Dave Messenger's group, Colecraft, which is fantastic. And then all of this is original, and just took mountains of soap, what do they call the wood soap? And that's saved this. A lot of the original glass, we had to go get people in Erie to go get the glass redone here, which is all over the place. The sun porch which is really nice, was really the garbage location. That's where the garbage was located. And that drove Betty nuts. So we got rid of that. And next thing you know, we got a glass table. Next thing you know, we turned that into a nice little conference room. This was the executive director's office, was right here. Raleigh and Kristen, until they moved upstairs. And we probably spent more time in the gold room because that's, we did a lot of early interviews, was in there. Because it had a nice fireplace and it had gold carpet too.
Really?
Mustard gold carpet. It was old. And that didn't last much longer. But we did a major renovation of all the carpets. Barclay Wellman led that charge. We went through room by room. But our goal was to go room by room. This is the grant room. We wanted to be, this was one of the first because this was our boardroom here. And then the gold room, and they patched it up. We had people in there and they did all the gold leaf and spent a lot of money on that. It was Stanley Weeks. We got money for that. That was the Weeks room. This was Betty's room. A lot of this is Betty's. Murphy's soap. I'm not, that's how this happens. You wait and see. You laugh now. It'll come to you. Us older people, it comes gradually. Because there's cigar smoke all over the place. All these Masons for 85 years smoked the cigars, and it's where it stuck. That's where it stuck. And if you look on the other side of this wall, you'll see a lot of bubbling, blistering. That's from a fire they had. Really bad fire in here. 60s. Yeah. So there's a lot of history. We had Sarita Weeks do the history of this place and interviewed her at one point about the history. So there's a lot of attention was done to the building. We spent a lot of time on gathering resources, not financial resources, but also people who could tell a story. The Masons could tell a story. Sarita Weeks could tell a story because she was here over 50 years. What was the building like? She got interns to actually do the research on this building itself. So there's the Sarita Weeks history. And then there were subsequent histories written about the building itself, the actual building, which I found interesting. Sometimes you just live it. These bookcases here came from out of another law office I was working in Fredonia, Jim Summers. We were bag boring, stealing everything. Because we didn't have a lot of money, but we had certainly a great will to do something brand new. This is out of whole cloth. I mean, I think what's wonderful to me is that this project is whole cloth. We had a building which really was, for those who remember, where you were the front as you walk in to the right, that was the office for the Masons. That's all it was. And then upstairs, where Kristen's office now is, that's all they had. The rest of it was sort of cut off, shut off. Because they couldn't pay the utility bills, they couldn't do anything, so there was just, and water that was just leaking, and it led to a lot of damage. So what people see here now and say, wow, this is quite a place. Not necessarily always so. In fact, when I tell them what we paid for it, there's a shock and awe. They lose track of the fact how much we added to it, fortunately. And that was a combination of things. The foundations I talked about, the earmarks from the state, and some private donations. Which is interesting history. By the way, Kathy Evans wrote us history of this place. It's worth reading. I think she did the first 15 years. So that kind of captured a lot of stuff. Maddy, last question before I pass out.
As the surviving founder, you say, Rolland had his mission statement for what he believes that the center could be in the future. Going into the next 25 years, what would you say? What would your mission statement to be? Is it any different?
It's, I have to answer this, typical lawyer fashion. I'm going to take time to get there. We're the Robert Jackson Center. Can't lose track of the fact of the namesake. And so you got to underscore most everything you do. It has to have a Jackson underlying aspect to it. Now, he was a human being. He wasn't, the next coming. So, but it turns out that since he died in 54, and he always said, if history should be 50 years, you look at it in 50 years to see if it has legs. He said it much more articulate. But we're now into that 50-year cycle, and all of a sudden it has legs. Korematsu, Barnett, Brown, executive orders, steel seizures case, Nuremberg. Here it is, 80 years after the trial. They're having movies. Who knows? Might be up for Oscars. All of that stuff, you'd say, this is a guy from Jamestown, New York. So it's Jackson-centric. The words you used, and we've changed, over time, the mission, the verbiage has changed. You look at our original, it's not too far from what it is now, but it's changed. I would hope that always would be. The temptation is to be exposed to injustices in a variety of different areas. Clearly injustices. Is that the core mission of the Robert H. Jackson Center? So you got, it could be certain civil rights of certain groups that you'd say, should we tackle that? Or should we just continue to stay focused on Robert Jackson and then let other people tackle it, using his words? So I don't know the answer to the question. I would hope we'd always maintain that Robert H. Jackson-centric mission. I'm sure they are mindful of that here today. Kristen's doing a great job of doing that. But the temptation would be very great to dilute that and take on other notable causes. I hate to use the term just causes, but because we used to be, and it's symbolic. One of the things we did, and maybe I should have said something about it, but if you look at this here, this is our very first program, my calendar. And on both of these says Robert H. Jackson Center for Justice. Robert H. Jackson Center for Justice. Sometime during that either first year or second year, we eliminated for justice and just said Robert H. Jackson Center. Now, our corporate name is, in fact, Robert H. Jackson Center. It's always been that. But we added a tagline to it. We thought initially that would be appropriate. It's justice, justice. Well, it became a conversation on our board where maybe it was limiting. So why do we have it on there? Might there be something else on the Robert H. Jackson Center that's not necessarily for justice, for biography, for, learning Solicitor General role or Attorney General? Why is it for justice? So we've eliminated that. You don't see that. Yet it's interesting. When you reflect back, there it is. It's real. Our first, I'm sure, the Post-Journal article, the first one we had that they put out, Christy Herbst put out, justice. So it's a long answer and kind of a disparate answer to your question, but somewhere in all of that, making sure the core value of Robert H. Jackson and not overly expose yourself, as we did, using a term, for justice. Now, we never thought, to be honest with you, we would be caught up in that, where we'd be taking on everybody's cause. Again, it doesn't mean it's not real to the people whose causes are being unjust. It's real. It's real. I don't want to give examples because there's lots of them, but it's very easy to fall into that where somebody makes a very impassioned plea that we should. We've during the first year, in fact, we had a couple of instances I won't get into, but where we just wanted a rental and we let somebody use our place. Thinking, well, it's income, who cares? Well, they used it advertising-wise. The Robert H. Jackson Center presents, or Robert H., they took advantage of it. And it was like, I attended, I go, holy cow, do we want our name affiliated with that? Probably not. So we over time morphed out of a few things that you learn by doing. All of which, frankly, went to the story of For Justice. You know, they felt very strongly about their need, but it was very kind of off center from what we were wanting to do, which is really those three pillars that you talked about. Michael Berenbaum, Tom Hagen. You know, stay focused. Keep it simple, stupid. You know, the KISS theory. I don't know if they said that, but that's kind of the idea. Yeah, stay focused. Stay focused. Hi, Maddy. This is it.
That was
I
it.
thought that was it.
That was it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good ending question.
Good try.
Very good. Very good questions. Okay.
Well, thank you for letting us.